What up, Midgard? My name's Daniel Cumming, and welcome to the Rune Yoga Embodying Magic podcast. Welcome to the podcast. My name's Daniel Cumming. This podcast is brought to you by runeyoga.org. So if you want any information about anything to do with this podcast, myself or any of the guests that I interview, head to runeyoga.org and you can get more information about what we do here. So I'm very excited. I have a very special guest for you today. I've been wanting to chat to him for a while, wanting to pick his brain about all this sort of stuff. So I thought this podcast was the perfect place to do it. So if you're from the Sunshine Coast, he's probably no stranger to you. He's one half of the yoga powerhouse called Being Yoga. He's been teaching yoga for about 18 years. For 12 of those years, he's been training brand new teachers to teach. And over those 12 years, he's probably trained over 1,000 new yoga teachers, including myself. So very excited, and I would love to introduce to you all Michael Daly. Welcome, Michael.
Thanks, great to be here, and thanks for having me along. Look forward to it.
Thanks for joining me. So I wanted to chat about a few different things. Michael's actually developed a system over the years he's called Chakra Vinyasa. So I've been to one of his retreats that he runs, and it was just such an amazing experience. And I think he's really leveled up, or he's ahead of the game when it comes to working with the chakra system, something I don't know much about, so I'd love to chat to him. And he's found a way which I think is a really good way of just simplifying the idea of meditation. Because I remember when I first got into meditation and was learning about mindfulness, I wanted to start teaching people to help myself learn. And I remember organizing a introduction to mindfulness and meditation, and it was over 5 weeks. And I think the people that came left a bit more confused about meditation than when they actually first got there, because in my idea, the better teacher you were, the more techniques you had. So I taught them all the different techniques I was learning and what I'd learned over the years, and we barely did any practice. So Michael's Calm Living meditation, I think, has really found a way to give you exactly what you need, not just at the start, but over a long period of time, and really simplified it down to the bare essentials. But I thought I'd start with, I suppose, your story of how you got into yoga and what led you to here. At the moment.
Yeah, okay, great. I sometimes, I think, talk about myself as a cat with a lot of different lives, and I've led a lot of different lives. So before any of this crazy life started, I wanted to be a professional tennis player. So I grew up just a crazy sports person, played every sport imaginable, cricket and tennis, basketball, athletics, everything. And I was one of these people that had this blend of sports, but I also had an academic side, and I did quite well at school. And at a certain point, I decided I was never going to be a professional tennis player because I just didn't have the skills or the mindset at the time. That was important, because I think later in my life, one of the reasons I'm so passionate about mindset is because I realized if I'd known then what I know now, I probably could have got a lot further down the track in that sports world. Yeah. So I kind of eventually just threw in the sports for a period of time and went to uni and studied law and worked in criminal law for a number of years. And then I thought, well, it's going to be my life, suit and tie, totally over that. And pretty unthankful kind of job, criminal law. Went back to uni, did a business and marketing degree, and then I found myself in the UK working over there as a marketing manager. I was running a number of further education colleges, doing all their marketing, had a big team, a big budget, life was great, met a beautiful girl, I was traveling the world, everything was great. And I always say to people, life's always great until the day it's not. And I know I'd got really attached to life being I thought it was perfect. I remember saying to someone back in London when I was living there, I think the final piece of the jigsaw has fallen into place. I got all the answers to life. And, as I say to people, beware the commentator's curse, because it's always when you make a big call in life that I think you're one day away from it crumbling. And so my life kind of crumbled away. My fiance left me in a heap, went back to Spain, my job fell apart, my health fell apart. And I remember being in London, and I was kind of walking around, if you've ever been to London, and it's a bit of a drab place anyway. So I remember walking around, it was a bit dreary, it was a bit grey, a bit rainy. and the world just looked so unhappy, and I was so unhappy. And I remember just feeling like everything was so impermanent, and it was just changing so much. And I'd led this life where I'd had all this success and achievement. I'd made money, I'd traveled, I'd found this love, and then suddenly it felt like everything had just gone. And I was 28 at the time, and I remember really distinctly thinking to myself, well, I could just rebuild the castle of my life again from this point. But it felt like it was only ever going to be a castle in the sand, if that makes sense. Like I felt such a profound sense of no matter what I built in my life again from that point, was always only one step away from just being, say, washed away again. And this profound sense of impermanence and just, I guess the changefulness of life really struck me at that time. And it just woke something up inside. And I had this profound sort of insight in my head that said, if everything in my life is so transient, so changing, what would happen if I just got really still? And so I said to myself, if life's, I can't hold on to anything good in my life really, it's all going to change again. Would there be something inside me that is unbreakable, unchangeable? So I just committed. I just got on a meditation course, and I said, I'm just going to get still. I'm just going to close my eyes, and every single day I'm just going to go inside and see what lives inside this place called stillness and calm and silence. And that was the birth of it all, really. It was the commitment to, I always say, go against what I see as the flow of life that's kind of pulling us toward an inevitable end called death and old age and, whatever it is, and suffering. And I thought, can I actually find something in myself that's not subject to all of that? And that was really the birth of it all. And then through that kind of rebirth, if you like, that started coming about, someone said to me in London at the time, why don't you do a yoga class? I'd never thought about doing a yoga class, ever. And it was at a time when all the celebrities were getting into it, and the front pages of all the magazines, it was Ginger Spice and Madonna doing all their yoga. And I thought, I don't know. But she said, just give it a shot. And being a sports person and always being into training, I thought, well, this is, it could be really good to have that physical part of my meditation practice. I did my first ever yoga class. I walked out of that class. I remember looking in the mirror at the change rooms at the gym. It wasn't an amazing class. It was just a yoga class. And I remember saying to myself, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And threw my job in. And I've never looked back. That's all I've done for the last 18 years. I've just taught yoga and mindfulness. And that's been the journey. And if you'd told me one day before that that's what I was going to do with the rest of my life, I would have laughed at you. Like, it was just such a random shift for me from an academic sports person to a yoga teaching, meditation, vegetarian, non-drinking, non-partying. But it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah, that's so interesting that huge realization, because I find that happens a lot with yoga, and that's why I was so interested in yoga, is like that kind of like gateway to ideas of thinking outside the box or thinking about your consciousness. It's something that doesn't really happen in most other physical practices. Like I was into fitness and all that sort of stuff before in general, training, functional training, and you don't really get that. So it's interesting how it's like that kind of a gateway to other things.
Yeah, I think it is, and I'd often say to students that I think people come to yoga for certain reasons. They come to yoga thinking, I want to get a good stretch in. I remember getting to fill out the health questionnaire. Why are you doing yoga? I want to get more flexible. I want to get stronger. I maybe want to relax. But I think what people are really seeking is a connection with something that life doesn't necessarily give to us. And whether it's through meditation or relaxation at the end of class, or just that sort of mindful breathing and focus, I found the same as you, that like sports never taught me that. Training at the gym, maybe, but not really. So yoga offers something that's almost ineffable. It's an intangible quality. It often is like a key that unlocks something for people, isn't it? You've had the same experience. And I see it all the time, just these moments of awakening, I call them, and they're beautiful. And it's why I love doing what I do today more than ever, because there's always going to be that new person who steps on their mat for the first time, who comes to a meditation cushion for the first time, whose life is in a little bit of disarray. So people say yoga's saturated, but it's not, because there's always going to be that next person who's in need of that, who's in need of a practice to come and just stop.
Yeah.
And so I think this practice is, I said it's as old as time. And I say, without trying to sound too grandiose, I think it's kind of the energy of the whole universe that is seeking some kind of harmony with itself.
Yeah.
And yoga is just a practice by which we can tune into this organizing energy in things, and let it move through us.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I suppose the next thing I want to talk about is how you, or why you decided to come up with the Calm Living meditation system. Is it a similar thing that I was talking about, that you really just wanted to give people a way of getting into meditation? Because I find from my experience, no matter what you do, whether you're just trying to, make your life a little bit more comfortable, or you want to get into the higher spiritual practices, I find meditation is just like the key to everything. It's like the intro to everything. I like to think of it as like emptying out the space to make room for whatever you want to do with your life, whether that's just to have a comfortable life or a successful work life or family life, or to evolve yourself to whatever you consider that to be.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, I think meditation is the foundation, it's the cornerstone upon which you build a yogic life anyway. And maybe it's not for everyone. I'll often say that, like, not everyone takes to meditation like I did, or perhaps you did.
Yeah.
For some people, it's just the buttons pushed and then I'm done. I'm in, I'm everything. I've jumped in the water, I've drunk the Kool-Aid, I'm in. And for others, it's just it's a lifetime of struggle with it. So, I acknowledge it's not for everyone. But for me anyway, and as for you, it's just this cornerstone that I couldn't imagine life without having that centering, still, quiet time every day to just, I often say to people, just to let your systems return to normal. I mean, if that's as simple as it is, just to let your brain and body and emotions and cells sort of calibrate with that whatever it is, with breath, with mind, with stillness, with energy, just to let your systems all come online together. So I feel that in modern life, we're kind of chasing, and we're always either one step ahead of ourselves, one step behind ourselves, but we're rarely just here in ourself, in our body. So when I got into meditation, as it is for a lot of people, and probably I find guys especially, when they get into meditation, they love getting, or some guys do, like to get a little bit mystical and explore all the esoteric side of things. And I was definitely one of them. And then there's the other camp who just reject all of the mysticism and esoteric side of things and just want the nuts and bolts kind of mindfulness, scientific, just that.
Yeah.
So I was someone who explored the esoteric and just loved the mystical promises of this path first. So I followed all the different traditions and all the different teachers, and I followed Buddhism and did Vipassana and Tibetan Buddhist practices. And then I followed an Indian Himalayan yogi, an incredible being by the name of Babaji, for many years, and studied with him in India, brought him out to Australia a lot. He taught a very simple and pure method of meditation. And then I studied with Kundalini meditation methods and all these other styles, just with an aim to sort of touch into all these different worlds and see what works. And I was meditating for 3 hours every day for the first 10 years of this path. I was doing long retreats and just really diving in to go, well, what works, what doesn't work. And then I eventually got to that point where a lot of what I've aimed to do with yoga and meditation is to be mainstream. And to teach the people who want just an authentic practice that they can use to get the benefits in their life today. So everything I've tried to do is sort of peel back the unnecessary garb of the traditions, to take the essence of them and with a lineage and honor that, but also say, like, there's so much unnecessary paraphernalia that we don't need, that can be off-putting. So after all those years of searching and being the internal kind of chemist, if you like, or scientist, I realized that what I was doing was just this conglomerate of these other techniques I'd learned, and I developed a very simple way of just meditating that was uncloaked with all the other stuff. And so the Calm Living formula came about basically through years of teaching and fumbling around trying to find the best way to meet people in their current life. And so I started like you, just teaching all the different techniques and looking at people's faces at the end of a workshop going, oh my God, what have you just taught me? You know,
seeing
it's
their
like,
brains explode.
you know, it's just too much. And just learning basically. And I often say that the best way to learn is to teach. So I just got out there and taught until I started to see a simple formula that worked for people. And so the Calm Living formula was brought out of that, which just has 4 simple steps I work with in mindfulness that I think make sense to everyone. And I can run through them a little if you'd like, just quickly. So the 4 stages are to settle the storm, center your attention, sink into silence, and select your state. And in a nutshell, the starting point that most people miss in meditation is this settle the storm idea. Most people just try and say, sit down, watch your breath, observe your breathing. And then they don't get a good result because their brain's too busy. Their brain waves are still too high and high beta. Their nervous system's crazy, it's stressed, they're restless in their body. So I realized that if you're going to have any success in meditation in 10 or 20 minutes, you need to quickly find a way to lower the thermostat and lower your brain waves, settle the stress out of your system. So I use a range of yogic breathing techniques and repetitive movement sequences to just get people to drop. And I find that within 2 or 3 minutes maximum can take people from a high beta brainwave to an alpha, even toward a theta brainwave through these not classical meditation techniques, but more active techniques. And what people love about them is there's a sense that they're doing something. It's not as passive as meditation. They're more active with it, and it just gets a result. Stage 2, center your attention. Now you're going to give your attention to just one thing. Your breathing, a mantra, something you visualize. And that's really important because I don't know about you, but in modern life, our brains are just jumping around to everything these days. And there's so many distractions and so many overwhelming things being plugged in. So meditation says, as hard as it is, just for short moments, focus on one thing at a time. And that's when people really often fall apart a bit in meditation because it's freaking hard. It's so challenging, isn't it? Okay, pay attention to the next 3 breaths. And people can't even do one, and they're off with all their thoughts and shopping lists and everything's got to get done. But that's the practice. Just keep coming back to one thing at a time. Notice the distraction without any judgment. Start again.
Because I think so many people come into meditation and think that you're supposed to just sit there and have no thoughts, and that's what they view from the outside. They see someone sitting there, and they look calm, they look like collected, look like mind's empty, but you never know what's going on. I think that's the hardest thing I've found as well. It's not like teaching, the asanas or something, or teaching, physical movement, because you can see what they're doing. You can't see what's actually going on in someone's mind. So you don't really know what they're doing and how to relate that as well, and everyone experiences it different.
Yeah, totally. And a lot of people have that misconception that meditation's about just having no thoughts. And you may have periods where you have no thoughts, but it's definitely not the aim of the practice, because I often say to people, no thoughts equals dead, basically, isn't it? And so I love having thoughts. I love the creative juice that thoughts give me. And I find when I meditate, my thinking changes, the frequency of it, all the surface stuff drops away. But then these profound insights and creativity and things emerge. So I do not want to stop thinking in meditation. And I don't care what anyone says, that I don't believe that's the aim of the practice. I want to enliven the capacity of my mind to be alive and awake and present and powerful and creative. I want to enable creative energy. Like I'll often sit down if I'm writing a book or a new project, and I'll often know that for the next month I won't have a quiet meditation, because I'll just sit, and as I get still, the ideas and insights that pour through, it basically writes the book for me. So, and that's really the aim, is like just to choose one thing to center on and stay with that without judgment. And John Kabat-Zinn, the founder of mindfulness meditation, said that beautifully. He said, mindfulness is the art of paying attention on purpose, in the present moment and without judgment. So in a nutshell, you make a decision to choose one thing, you pay attention to what's arising in the present moment, and whatever is arising, you meet it with non-judgment, which is kind of a simple navigating tool for your mind. But then what a lot of people, I think, miss in meditation, and I was lucky enough to meet a teacher in India, an American woman actually in 2005 who totally changed my life really, Candice O'Denver. And she introduced me to what in Dzogchen Buddhism is called the nature of your mind. And it's an introduction to the nature of mind that's often considered necessary in Dzogchen Buddhism, because once you've had that insight into what the real essence of your mind is, it changes your whole meditation practice. So instead of, for example, observing your breath, hoping that one day you'll get to that place of pure consciousness and pure peace, in Dzogchen you're introduced just for a short moment to a glimpse of that essence of your mind, that quiet, tranquil, open, present, spacious awareness. And then your meditation becomes a way of just grounding into that. So as I was introduced to that insight changed my whole life, and everything shifted from that point in 2005. And so when I came back to re-teach meditation after that, one of Candice's main teachings was that every human being has the capacity to recognize the nature of their mind. It's easy, it's effortless, it's just what we are. Yet it's not pointed out to us. So I wanted to develop a system of meditation where I was just subtly pointing that out to people within their practice. So most styles of meditation are what's called gradual meditation, where you're just gradually doing, waiting to get somewhere. But in calm living, I'll often start at the beginning, which is introduce the idea of openness, stillness, presence, and then allow the techniques to be almost like a pointer back to that natural state. Rather than using the technique to get to that, I allow every breath to rest into that openness of awareness, that basic state of presence.
Yeah, and I think that's the key word for me anyway, that resting, because I remember so going to the retreats and the meditations with you was the first time that I ever reached, I suppose, that what I call that sweet spot, where you kind of just drop in and everything kind of falls away and you just feel that sweet spot. And for me, it does feel like it's kind of like falling, just kind of like this dropping away of everything. And when I found that, of course, I wanted to reach that every time in the meditation, and I got that on, I think, the first or second day of that calm living retreat with you, and then I never got it again for the rest of the retreat because I was going for it. It just kind of happened accidentally. I was sitting in there, resting into it, and then I reached it, and I was like, oh, that was amazing. I want to go there again, and I couldn't get there. I think maybe the last day when you mentioned something about, I think I mentioned it, and you said to just let go and not go for it. But it's hard, hey, how do you do that? It's like that idea of, trying to get something by not wanting it. But how do you get something, or how do you attempt to get something without trying to get it? I think that's that paradox. Hey, it's really, it messes with you a little bit.
Yeah, it is, and it's that subtle carrot that's dangling in front of every human being, that we're always trying to get what we don't have. And what I was introduced to in India in 2005, and what I aim to introduce people to in their meditation practice, is what's already here. And if what's already here is here, this just simple nature of awareness. Right now we're sitting here, we're talking to each other. There's just a basic sense that we're aware. And inside that awareness is bubbling up our thoughts and emotions and our ideas and our, oh, yes, but. But just at the back end of all that is just this basic state of awareness. And the simplicity of recognizing that is what the whole of meditation's about, but it's rarely taught. And so it's not a path of seeking that, because you can't seek what's already there. If you think about it, what is seeking is what's waiting to be found. So it's more a path of recognizing rather than getting to or attaining.
I like that.
Yeah. And it's in the recognition of, like you said, just that settling. And it can feel like a dropping down. It definitely can feel like that, but you actually aren't dropping down into anything. You're not opening up into anything. You're not getting anywhere. You're simply turning the searchlight of your attention and letting it rest as the experience of just being open and aware for short moments. And that's all meditation is. You're not trying to hold on to these long moments of attention. You're allowing yourself to be open, spaciously aware, just as you are, and incorporating and integrating the totality of your experience in that moment, whether it be a breath, a thought, an emotion, a sound, a feeling, a restlessness. All of these arisings, I call them, all of these perceptions, these appearances, are just arising within this basic state of awareness. So that's the third part of the calm living formula that's really important, is you lower your brain waves, you focus your attention on something, but then you do this little hack, I describe it as, which is just letting go of everything. And for short moments, like you said, just allowing yourself to be, allowing yourself to drop down into that state of restful, open, natural awareness. And that for many people is, like you said, it's the first glimpse. It's the first glimpse that in the ancient traditions, you need to go to a guru to get all these instructions. But I found that just doing meditation with the right instructions and the right way to practice, it starts to introduce people to that, and they get a little taste. And once you got a taste, then you play the game like you did of, oh my God, that feels so good, I want to get back to that. But that is the game, because it's in the surrendering of that desire to get somewhere and in attaining that non-seeking state of mind. Like right now, if I said to you, what part of your mind is not seeking anything? And what's it like to just not be seeking anything?
Yeah.
Like actually to tune into a part of your consciousness, your awareness, that's not chasing, not running away from. It's not seeking anything. It's not describing anything. It's just here. And it's always here. And it's perfectly present. And you can't get rid of it. And you can't get more of it. That's the thing. So this trick to meditation is what I call this sinking into silence, which really just means letting yourself be for short moments and recognizing that sort of primordially present aspect to yourself that I believe was here before you were born and will be here after you die. It's the nature of this kind of conscious, self-aware space that everything inhabits. And we are that. Awareness isn't just inside me, it's reflected in me, but awareness is an ineffable quality that just is. It's this suchness, this isness. It just is. So that's the meditation. You can lower your brain waves, center, but really the essence is in this recognition phase of just getting familiar with, I call it just a friendship with yourself, like an inner friendship with just who you are and who you've always been, that kind of person that looks in the mirror as you get more grey and more wrinkled, but that part that's watching that's never changed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think that's the hard thing, to try to see that it's making sense to someone else, because that's one of the hardest things to try to teach someone, because you're trying to develop that language of what that means. Because it's interesting, because I said it felt like dropping down, but I've actually talked to other people who've entered even from that same meditation course, and they felt it completely differently. They felt like it was like a lifting up. So they felt they kind of started to lift up, their consciousness was lifting above their body, whereas I felt the drawing down, or someone might feel like it's turning inward, or someone might feel like it's coming outward. And I suppose it's, because we get locked into how we perceive it. And it's even just trying to teach like a normal vinyasa class. We may feel, this heel to the ground, like this kind of thing, and use this analogy, but someone will have no idea what you're talking about. So I suppose it's trying to find all the different analogies that, you find that one that makes sense to someone.
Yeah. And the simple one step back from everything you just said, which was lovely, is to ask somebody, okay, what's aware of that experience you're having? So for you, sinking down. Yet, would it be fair to say that there's an awareness of sinking down?
Yeah.
So sinking down is a perception that's arising. It has a beginning, middle, and end. It's an appearance. But it's happening within this basic state that's aware of all that. Whether someone's having a floating up experience, an expanding experience, a contracting experience, I say to them, what's aware of that? And that's the moment people's attention sort of does a 180, and instead of focusing on the, on the outcome of the experience. They focus on the essence of what's noticing. So it's a process of noticing and resting as the quality of noticing. And in that resting as without seeking, allowing the experience to unfold, whatever it is. And for me, this is such a beautiful way to live life, to just allow the flow of life to be whatever it's going to be. And I don't know about you, but my life's had its fair share of ups and downs, you know.
Definitely.
And every time it's going up, I want to hold on to it. And I know it's going to turn around, it's going to go down again. Yet I also know that the basic quality that's been with me throughout all the ups and downs is kind of unchanging throughout it all. Like I said, that presence that looks at yourself in the mirror all these years, it's always been the same. And we can tune into that and find a buoyancy and a freedom in that that is as remarkable as anything you'll ever experience in your life. And so that's the calm living formula. It's simple in its sense that it gives people tangible tools and techniques, but really when you get to the nuts and bolts of it, none of those techniques are necessary. Yet, if you're teaching lay people, mums and dads who are coming along to these little mindfulness courses, if you just get people to say, look, you're already enlightened, you're already awake, just rest and let yourself be, they'll just scream at you. So you give them some tangible tools to get like a feeling shift, something's changed, but then you want to allow them to have that kind of, that ineffable sense of themselves that alone is truly healing. And then out of that, and this really comes from the teachings of tantric yoga, out of that spacious, open awareness, we finish a meditation by saying, well, what do I want to give birth to out of that? Imagine the moment before the Big Bang that gave birth to this whole universe and energy came forth and created all of this. I think I've tuned into that kind of that empty, open field of my being. And now I want to choose, well, what's the emotion? What's the frequency? What's the Big Bang I want to give birth to every day? And so that's the last stage, is called select your state. And it's about recognizing that rather than most humans just get buffeted around by their emotions, you have the power to choose the emotional imprint you want to bring into your day. You can choose the frequency that you want to emanate out. And so I call that selecting your states, choosing to consciously be happy, be grateful, be kind, be loving. And I imagine myself, or I feel myself, get a sense of myself resting in that open, kind of uncontained space. And within that, I give birth to this quality of feeling and this joy or this gratitude, and I let it move through my body and imagine it moving out into the day. So these 4 simple steps that are simple yet hopefully have a profundity in them, a real depth, when you understand that I've taken them from the sort of the high pinnacles of these traditions, but then tried to distill them down in a way that modern Westerners can get maximum benefit in the minimum time.
Yeah, and I like that because I like to think of call it like paradigm neutral, because all these systems come from usually like a mythic framework. So what you've kind of done is take away all the myth around it and distill it back to its principles and the practicalities of it. But then now you can actually take this and you can kind of insert that into whatever belief system you're using. And I find that allows you to feel into that system a bit more, maybe instead of overanalyzing it, because I feel like people take things, very literally, mythic systems, no matter whether it's your religion or your spirituality or what you're doing in those kind of fields. But I really like it that's why I like these techniques of what I call paradigm neutral, because they can be applied to anything, whether or not you're completely atheist or you have some sort of spiritual practice. It just allows you to feel into that and allows that space. And because I like that analogy of settling the storm that you use as well, because from my experience in meditation, it came from a system. There was the idea of, they call it the I in the void. So it's kind of like this nothingness, but everything. So it's this complete void of nothingness, but it has a potential for everything. And most of the time, we're caught up in the storm. We're just getting pulled around in circles, circling around, and we don't even realize we're in there. But what you've allowed to do is simplify that method of separating from the storm and then starting to settle it and seeing, well, I'm not actually part of the storm. I'm just kind of observing the storm. And what I really want to talk about next in particular, and what this podcast is more so about, now we've separated from that storm and like you said, turned the 180 and even realized that we are this consciousness in that I, literally that I and the storm. we can start to bring in, the select your state. But what I like to talk about now is using a system to select your state. So a lot of people, consciously they'll say, okay, well, how do I select my state? I need, and start overthinking it again. So sometimes people use mantras, or for example, for me, I use the runes. That's my, my internal system. Whereas a lot of people use chakras, and that's what you've done. You've really implemented that chakra system and installed like a symbol set. So if we could chat about how you came to work with that system and how you've developed that over the years, the pitfalls that you've kind of experienced with it, and how you've brought that into the system that you've got now.
Yeah, great. So just one thing you said that I'd like to refine is that idea of separating from the storm. And in the calm living teaching and in the Dzogchen teaching, just language is really important, the way we talk about things. So to me, it can seem like I'm attaining a witness state or an observer state, and I'm separating or I'm detaching. In yoga, we call this vairagya. It's a detachment. But yet I think in the richness of the pinnacle teachings like Dzogchen, there is no sense of separating because everything is included and contained within this basic state. There is no separation. There's a saying that goes, show me anywhere in this space of this entire universe where we don't inhabit the same space. Everything is arising within the same space.
Gotcha, yeah.
And there is nowhere to separate yourself, because to separate is to assume a point of view of an independent self or an independent identity. And it's more a matter for me. This path is not. That idea of separation came from a masculine kind of patriarchal view of spirituality and religion, where 2,000 years ago all the religions started to become monotheistic, with your gods and your Allahs and your your one true God, and all the other deities got cast out. And that was a very masculine view. So that sort of masculine view of religion, if you like, is about, I'm here, there's something wrong with me, I'm filled with suffering, and I've got all this karma to get rid of, and the world sucks in a sense, and all I want to do is get out of it. I want to launch off into my nirvana, my heaven. I want to, whatever it is, I want to get away from it.
Yeah.
And if you think that's a very masculine approach to spirituality, it's a vertical approach. And so the teachings on those paths is very much about that detachment or separation. And men resonate with that because we go to our nothing room very easily. Like we can really easy just sit with that remote and zone out in front of the TV. It's it's super easy. Yet what I discovered through these teachings was that this idea of inclusivity rather than exclusivity. It's not that I'm trying to get to this exclusive realm where everything's going to be hunky-dory and beautiful. I want to recognize here and now that everything's pristine and beautiful and primordially pure.
Yeah.
And so it's a path of inclusivity. And that's what changed everything for me, because I was that sort of masculine approach to meditation, detach, step back, observe. And I realized I'd get very cold and separated and removed from myself and from friends and family and everything. So it's this path of inclusivity, of bringing back in. And that's where the chakra model really emerges from, because it's this teaching of Tantra, which has a beautiful line that says, bring everything to the path. I'm not getting off the path and shutting that out. I'm saying that everything that possibly ever is in existence is arising within me, in a sense. It's arising within the totality of this basic state of awareness. And so I want to learn how to surf the wave rather than wait just for the still day in the ocean.
Yeah, I completely agree, because that's even that idea of separation that I was talking about is really just what I think of half the journey, because a lot of the mysticism is all about separating, and then because everything is punishment, physical is bad. When monotheism came in, the spirit and then the body were separate. But yeah, I completely agree, and I love your take on it. Yeah, because I think that's really just half the journey, kind of in my opinion, kind of like some sort of separation or some sort of new view of it. And then once you've got that new view of it, you can come charging back with, new passion and giving it meaning and seeing, well, really, it all just is a big, beautiful game.
Yeah.
There's this big storm. I don't have to be blown around. I can actually take a bit more control of what I want out of life and charge back in and have a bit more fun, but also be a little bit detached and have a bit more of a sense of humor about it. Yeah, I feel like when it comes to this stuff, people get a little bit too serious about it. So it's good to have that kind of sense of humor. It is just this beautiful big game.
Yeah, it is a bit of a game, isn't it? And it's nice to have that perspective that, I guess it's all going to end up somewhere anyway, and I can either choose to be totally immersed and attached to everything and stuck in it, or I can, practice the art of seeing things as they are, allowing them to flow, and kind of getting unstuck in every moment. And I get unstuck through a mental process, but what I love about yoga is it's a physical process too. I found when these insights arose back in 2005, my mind was, very free, and I remember just coming home from India and just sitting around in places at the beach or by the river and just feeling so incredibly free. Like I couldn't imagine ever having more freedom, more openness, more emptiness, more clarity. It's such a profound shift that happened for me in 2005 that just the world changed because my inner mind recognized what had always been there, but had just never been pointed out. But then I started studying under the direction of Ken Wilber. And Ken Wilber for me is just a genius of our time, and he's written extensively on Eastern and Western spirituality and psychology and developmental theory. And this is where things really started to change for me, because one of his famous sayings, or it comes out of Buddhism, is emptiness is form and form is emptiness. Now that sounds very esoteric and weird. What does that mean? It means basically that this emptiness of being I've been talking about, this open clarity of awareness, and everything that's arising within that is just one reality. Emptiness, or this basic state that holds all of form, all of the appearances that come up, thoughts, emotions, the world, people, places. It's essentially the same thing. And that all of form is arising and dissolving. It's kind of impermanent, yeah? So for thousands of years, the Buddhist traditions taught the whole practice of meditation, of living, of enlightenment, is just to recognize this arising and dissolving, and realizing that all appearances are just basically empty appearances. They have no independent nature. They had no substance. Okay. But then Ken Wilber came along, and through all the studies of the development of our body, how our brains evolved, how culture changes over time, how humans developed over time, how systems of economy and everything changes, he added this crucial element to this mix, and he said, emptiness is form and form is emptiness, yet what we've realized is that form itself is evolving. And when I heard that, it sort of just revolutionized my mind. It changed everything, because what it means is that, yes, everything that is in the universe is essentially empty, and it's impermanent, and it's going to, arise and dissolve kind of thing. And yet when we look at what's happening with matter and energy, it's empty underneath, but it is seeming to be organized over time in a way that's evolving to this richer complexity. So if you look at the human brain, it's evolved this triune brain, whereas before it was basically like a reptilian brain, and we've evolved this new brain. If you look at culture, we've evolved from sort of this mythical to these magical, to these agricultural, to these technological societies we live in. Culture itself is evolving. Our own culture we can look at in our own life, and the development of a human over time. It starts out as a baby, very unconscious, undifferentiated. Like as a 7-year-old, we become more emotional beings and start to get a sense of I and me. In teenage years, we get a real sense of, taking risks and breaking down walls and doing all of that. We move into adulthood, and our brain starts to solidify a little bit more, and we get a sense of different roles and responsibilities, etc., etc. So the idea of this, I guess, evolutionary path of a spirituality shifted from me And I took the calm living formula, which is your basic mindfulness practice of getting in touch with that clarity and that empty, open state of being, and then overlaid that with a system of evolutionary psychology and development. And because I'm a yogi, I wanted to bring that into a yoga model. So I started to blend the idea of what the chakras are as these inner energy centers, but to understand them more as a process of evolution and human development that we go through throughout history, but that we can consciously choose to go through in the course of a human life. That we can consciously choose, and this is the rub, that the lower centers of our chakras become our, what we call our animalistic centers. They're the things that, I don't know about you, keep pulling us down all the time. I feel like I'm starting to move forward in my life and something comes in and pulls me back. This old emotion, this old thought, I keep falling in that same hole. Now, the chakra model as a system of development says these lower centers do what nature wants us to do. The lower center is about overcoming fear and being safe. The second center is about sex and procreation. Third center is about eating and getting somewhere in the world, making money. And then nature, in a way, says, that's all I need. So all I need is the lower centers. And these higher centers are kind of passive. But what the system of evolutionary psychology says is that we can consciously choose to start bringing our animal nature and turn it up and bring it from the lower and make that giant leap toward the heart. So for me, I developed the Chakra Vinyasa yoga practice as a blend of everything that's wonderful about movement in yoga, with the psychology of the mind, with the inner energetics of energy, and these principles of human development to create kind of a system that we can choose to evolve ourselves internally.
Yeah, and I love it. I think it's got so many levels that I would love to explore over the next few years more. And but you can get a lot from it straight away. And I think that's the hard thing, especially now trying to develop my Rune yoga at the moment, trying to get, share that feeling that you might have got over 10 years of working with the system into a 90-minute class. How do you give them a taster of, so what's been one of the hardest things that you found doing that, trying to, don't go, here, do this for the next 5 years and come back and tell me how you feel. How do you implement that kind of model into a class and things like that? And what are some of the pitfalls that you found initially trying to do that?
Yeah, I realised, I say to a lot of my students that that when you learn some of these techniques and these teachings that they're not always for everyone. And so I've been a little bit reserved in teaching some of the, might be maybe deeper practices, waiting for the students to come and seek that out. Because I think, to be honest, what I've found over 20 odd years of teaching and just looking at the world is that, to be honest, I think 95% of people out there just aren't really interested, aren't ready, not going to put the work in. And so I can't guarantee they're going to get a result. I can't be responsible for them getting a result initially, because there's a readiness that comes as well. There's a readiness when I think you've had enough pain, you've had enough disquiet, enough suffering in your life that you go, I don't want to spend another day getting pulled back down and falling in that same hole again. And I'm sure you've had it, I've had plenty of it, where you realize, man, even though I'm moving forward, I feel like something's just pulling me back all the time. One step forward, 2 steps back, and I feel like, I'm kind of running in place. And I honestly sense that there's a point that comes when you're just fed up, and you're just sick of it.
It's that crisis or resistance that almost has to create that spark for you to take action. Yeah, because it's so interesting what motivates people to do that, to get into these kind of things.
Exactly, and it's a great thing to ask people, because I think everyone will have a story to tell you of a crisis point. And if they don't have that crisis point, it doesn't mean they can't access this, because everyone's got access to this all the time, as I said. It's just that they probably won't have the motivation to practice. To practice the art of tuning in to that basic natural, free state of mind, the practice of doing the inner work to move energies around inside, the practice of noticing when that energy starts to pull me down and going, just for today, I've got a choice. And just for today, I'm going to choose to do something to just make that energy turn back up again. If you imagine like a candle flame, it's wanting to burn up, but sometimes the wind gets it and it blows it and it pushes it down. And a lot of this path for me, like the techniques are great, but it more comes down to a way of understanding that life flows and it's cyclical and it's not a linear journey and it's a rhythmic journey. It's about being in the flow of experience and recognizing the experience will take us up to those exalted heights and it'll pull us down. And it's a moment-to-moment choice of how do I want to meet those moments. So for me, the practice of this Chakra Vinyasa, the internal meditation of it, is to, yes, use breath and visualization energy to just kind of create these open channels in your spine, in your body, in your energetic body. Because I like to think that when this energy really starts to wake up for you, you've got to have a strong vessel to hold that energy. And when you don't, you get leaks. You get leaks in your physical body as injuries or disease. You get leaks in your subtle body that can appear as emotional crises or even deep existential crises. And that if you've got these leaks, that's where energy's trying to move forward in your life and it starts to find a way like a river finds these.
So when you say strong vessels, so what first steps would you recommend? Because I was having a conversation the other day about someone who'd done a bit of Kundalini stuff, and she was talking about how people get into that practice or the breath work and when they're not ready and they cause these mental imbalances and things like that. What would you say would be the first steps towards preparing the vessel, or and what do you consider the vessel to be, and how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. So for me, the classical yoga formula, which I really think is fantastic, is that the vessel first is your physical body. And so I look at this whole path as steps and stages on the way of increasingly building a readiness and an inner strength and fortitude and resilience.
Yeah.
So most yoga starts with people coming to their mat and just realizing they're just riddled with tension and just strain in their body, and it's torture just to go into a forward bend. So before you can hope to move all this subtle energy in your body, you got to get rid of the tension in your hamstrings, your hips. You got to free your neck and shoulders. You got to learn to breathe softly. So step one, strengthening your vessel, is the outer vessel. Opening the joints, strengthening your muscles, freeing the physical, muscular tension. And then from there, going into the calm living process of actually learning to be still, to just sit and meditate amidst the restlessness and the chaos inside, and just allow yourself, like you said, to just drop in and settle. And in that, you have glimpses of this pure, free, stainless part of your mind. So the vessel for me first is the physical body, the outer vessel. And then the mental body is the kind of second, is learning to have discernment and clarity and focus and openness and inclusiveness. And then the Chakra Vinyasa for me is the third phase, because it plugs in then between the physical body and the mental body, this subtle energy body. And like you said, people have blowouts in Kundalini if they just start with the subtle energy body, because their vessel, just their physical body, is going to blow out. They're going to get injuries. They're going to get sick. People get sick. And then they're going to push too much energy through their brain and their mind that they're going to have all sorts of anxieties and stress. And there's hospitals in the States that house people who have had like Kundalini awakenings that have almost like schizophrenic episodes, because their vessel, which I liken to your subtle body, your spine, your nervous system, your neuroendocrine system, all these systems that plug in together, where mind and emotions and body meet. And you want to have a really good sense of ownership of that. Like, I know how my body works now, in a sense. I've got a handle on how my emotions are triggered. I've got a handle on how my brain works. I've got a handle on these thoughts, and I can manage them a little better. My body's freed of tension. I'm feeling good. And then I can start to plug in this kind of internal growth chakra system into that. I mean, not everyone might agree with that model, but for me, it's a very safe and sequential way to think about it. And like I said, 95% of people could care less about the internal energetics of, say, the chakra system or energy system, subtle body. But for me, when you've been on this path for so long, you just realize there is an energy, there is a field, there is something that I'm plugged into. And if it's as above, so below, if it's everywhere outside, it's everywhere inside. That was my insight, that yeah, the chakras can seem woo-woo and like, who cares? And I even went through that phase of, who cares? It's a load of rubbish. But the more I stayed on the path, the more I tuned in, and now studied amazing, a lot of modern research now kind of pointing us back to this idea of the field.
Yeah, the quantum field.
Yeah. And the inner energetics. And Dawson Church has done some incredible research in some books called The Genie in Your Genes and Mind into Matter. And just like how our brain, our body, and these fields interact. And it's science now, you know. So for me, having sort of practiced this for 20 years, it's nice to have that validation to go, hang on, there is these subtle energy fields. And yogis from millennia ago, I believe they probably got these insights through plant medicines and through psychedelics. They got the insights of the chakra system and these inner luminous characteristics, but they got them, they mapped them, and now we have a system that we can actually transform ourselves, which is really exciting.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to put forward as well, is the idea of having a system. Because I feel like we're very blessed these days to have access to so much stuff on the internet. We've got all these different systems, but I feel like a lot of people are just kind of picking and choosing. Oh, I like this idea from this system, or I like this, myth, and I like this concept. And they're kind of overlapping certain things, and they leave gaps, and they double up on certain ideals. And I feel like a lot of people don't stick with one particular system or one structure. And I think that's the problem these days. And I think it comes down to what you said at the start of this, is what works. Because, whether you have this belief system, this spirituality, if nothing is really changing, or if you're not changing, or how you act changing, or if you're not getting, testing as well. Because what I really like to talk to is how you perceive this. And that's what I call this embodying magic, because this idea of self-transformation, using our conscious mind to transform ourselves and our outer world, inner and outer worlds. The first name for this concept was magic that I came to, because I started looking into these people who have studied old ideals of these kind of things. So I'd like to kind of get your current, because it's always changing, right? Your current theory of how this works, of this idea of taking your consciousness, developing a system, or like this meta communication between your conscious and unconscious, or your consciousness and the collective unconscious, or the quantum field, or basically like your idea of how that works, or what that even is, or if you have a name for it as well. Because I feel like people have different names and concepts for this same idea.
Yeah, it's a massive field, isn't it? It's a massive area of discussion that you could probably sit down and talk for 10 days.
Yeah, we need another few podcasts for that.
And yeah, one of the reasons a number of years ago that I was, I'm doing the work I've been doing for a lot of years. I've led, 65 odd long retreats over the years and training courses, and I got involved. I wanted to be able to support people to, like you said, access that unconscious realm even more. So group work's profound, but I want to be able to sit with people and guide them through this transformation. So I got fascinated with hypnosis and NLP and different systems of tapping into the unconscious realm. And I had experience in my training some years back with hypnosis, and something just shifted inside. It was like it's like someone had dropped a little pearl into my unconscious mind and locked something that 20 years maybe of meditation and all this other work hadn't had such a direct path to. And I had this experience, and I remember sitting down at the beach at Noosa later that day and just feeling euphoric. And I went home that night and danced like no one's watching. Well, there was no one home, and I just put some music on. I was just dancing like a madman. I just felt this euphoric bliss that I'd found a way to really quickly access what you call the unconscious, or some people call the collective conscious, or the field, or another part of us. So yeah, I began sitting down with people one-on-one in my clinic and helping them then navigate these states and transform their inner mind through hypnosis and different mechanisms like that. I don't really know how it works. Like, that's the thing. I think it is magic. And I often say someone will come and sit down with me for 1 or 2 sessions of focused work. And they come back and they say, look, I'm just not the same person I was. Everything's changed. And it is magic. And I just got so enthralled at the power of our mind to tap into this field. And I do believe it's a collective field, but I also believe it's an individual field. I think, like I said, that if you look at the process of development, we are individuals and we are collectives at the same time. We are evolving in ourselves and we are evolving in culture as a collective. And so I believe that as we learn something in ourselves, it's embodied in ourselves. But I believe as we learn something, we hold a frequency. As we place an intention in ourselves, we change our mind structure and we kind of send that out into the collective field. And, there's been lots of studies about collective phenomena of where something's learned in one area, in a tribe of animals, for example, and it's picked up in another area. There's been lots of studies. Larry Dossey did an incredible book called One Mind, where he studied this phenomena of the field and this kind of one mind. And check that book out. It's a fantastic book, really well researched, with whether it's animals or humans, that we're all accessing this field. But what I honestly believe is that there's times when we access it deeply and it has the power to change our life. But most of the time, most humans I see are running a program of fear and stress and worry and doubt and me and mine. And we're so stuck in this kind of survival crocodile brain that it is almost next to impossible to drink from that well that is organizing. So you're just going to get more of the same if you're living in that state of sort of contraction, closeness, lack of novelty, shutdown. You're just going to get more of the same. And your mind and your body and your life and the people you'll resonate with, the people you'll work with, the relationships you'll have are people that are going to resonate at that same frequency. And you're just going to have a life that's kind of surface, mundane. And so, like I said, the stage one of the vessel also is you got to get people out of stress. You got to get people into that collective, safe space in their brain and in their relationships, so they can start to just have, like you said, those glimpses, that dropping down. And for me, I really believe it's just using certain tools to allow yourself to swim in that infinite sea every day. And you can do that with intentionality, some people like, or I think you can also just do it with a sense of dipping your consciousness into that field and just knowing that there's an organizing principle in life that will move through you every time you make a commitment just to kind of dunk yourself into that. So a big part of my practice is just these short moments. Every time I remember throughout the day, just resting in that open state we've talked about, letting yourself kind of just be in that open ground. That is the organizing field. That is the God state, the Brahman field, whatever you want to say. I believe this simple, present, aware state is God, is consciousness. It is just this self-knowingness that exists everywhere. And the more I recognize that, the more I just become that, and that just moves through. And I can consciously do tools, meditation, hypnosis, chakra meditation, to kind of then implant the kind of frequencies I would love to be organized for me. So there's kind of a passive way to do this, and then there's a really active way. And that's yoga, the yin and the yang. And I think a bit of both is fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I really like that. I think of when you're trying to, you're talking about what I call dropping in or connecting with that, collective. I like to think of using symbol systems to bypass that conscious mind, because I feel like when you're really trying to make change, it's like kind of like self-hypnosis. That's the way I kind of view the idea of magic or chakras or runes. It's kind of like a self-hypnosis. If I'm saying to myself certain concepts, my conscious mind's like, no, I know that's not true. Whereas if you bypass that with a symbol system and really, but it's like you're talking about, you really need to spend time with it, because that symbol system doesn't really mean anything to you, or if it means anything, it's still part of that analytical mind, whereas you really have to absorb that system, and then it can just bypass and go through. And I like to think of that as like that communication with the cosmos, or with that collective, or when you dip into that, you use this language that you've created to interact with it. And for me, at least, because I have a very analytical mind, using the English language stimulates me too much. Whereas if I use the runes, it's more of an unconscious kind of language, and I can kind of drop in my intentions or drop in the certain rooms and the streams, and then when I come back to normal. And do you think there needs to be a really specific process, like a ritual almost, to be able to make change? Like if when you've, obviously we're working on ourselves, but have you worked with trying to make change in a larger perspective? So yes, yourself, but also the way the world works and things like that. And if so, do you think there's because I like to think of, people call it manifestation, kind of, it's like you're making an order for your unconscious or the universe. So you pick up the phone, you want to order something, and then you close it off and you're back to your, mundane state of mind. Whereas if people are trying to constantly operate in that higher state of mind, I feel like it's like the phone's always off the hook. And then you constantly, the universe or whatever you want to call it is listening. And it's like, what are you saying? And they keep sending you all these things. And then you're wondering, well, I didn't order this. And it's like, yeah, you actually did. You ordered it. That's the way I kind of think of. That's why when I'm trying to manifest something or even change myself, like change a habit, I have a ritual where I'll, like a way to start, get myself into this higher state of consciousness, and then drop myself out back into like a mundane kind of consciousness, and then hopefully it'll filter through my subconscious or unconscious. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. I think that makes a lot of sense. And like I said, there's so many different ways I think that you can ride this wave. And yes, I think the power of a practice is really important, and yet it's not necessary.
Okay.
So I think, like we were talking about earlier, this basic state does require no practice. It's purely a recognition. So for me, I practice that as my 24/7 practice. It's just living now, teaching a yoga class, teaching meditation, going about my day, being with my partner, and every time I remember, which isn't always, because, whatever, we get distracted, but increasingly as you remember, just to rest, and in that moment, that recognition of this simple present awareness, allowing it to be, allowing everything to swim through you, I believe is, like I said, the organizing field. So that's not really a formal practice, that's just a moment-to-moment recognition. So that for me is what I call, like you said, you're 24/7. You said dropping back into the mundane. It kind of is the mundane mind. It's just the ever-present. But people call that the mundane mind, and because of that language, in a sense too, we don't register that the mundane, ordinary mind, I say in Buddhism, it's the ordinary mind is the enlightened mind. But minds, consciousness, humans are seeking something exotic. Like we want to blast off into the beautiful, mystical, psychedelic realms, which is great. However, we miss that even in the heights of a psilocybin mushroom journey where your mind's just catapulted out into the cosmos and you're just filled with fractals of colour and bliss and illumination, what's aware? That basic state that's holding that experience is always present. So for me, there is that sense of not wanting to get caught up in it needing to be anything, because it is just here and it can't ever not be. If you want to call it spirit, consciousness, God, whatever, I just call it this basic state of restful awareness. It's always here. So I think it's important to go, I don't need anything. I don't need a practice. I don't need a formula. I just need to rest and recognize and allow myself to be that. And that's instant freedom. That doesn't change, and that's always here. You're always awake, can't not be. And yet, I realize that, well, hang about, I can realize that I'm a participant in this game. Yeah, it's a game. Yogis call it Leela, the game of life. And I realized that, yeah, it's kind of unfolding, it's moving, and as Ken Wilber said, it's actually evolving to higher complexity. And it'll happen regardless, won't it? Like, even if you say someone's kind of totally unaware, unconscious, evolution's going to happen through them one way or another. It's just going to be very slow. The question is, do I want to maybe quicken the process and do it with more intention? So like you said, using the rune or using symbols to do that. And then the chakra system becomes the same way, to either drop in intention or drop in mantra or drop in feeling. And I often give this example very briefly. I'll just say, imagine 3 people walking down the road on a Sunday morning. First person sees a little child run across the street, freaks out. Oh my God, how could you let your kid run out? Fear, worry. Second person's walking along, doesn't even see that. They see all the people at the cafes, and they see their language and the way they're talking. They see the colours of their outfits, and they smell the lovely food and everything. The third person's looking at the cafes going, gee, they're full. Running the numbers, 20 people, $20 a head, that's $400, and they're running the numbers, got the business mind. So say 3 people can have a very different experience of the same reality. If you think about it, first person's running what I'd call a first chakra, fear and doubt and security. Second person, second chakra, they're seeing the colors, the world, the sensuality. Third person, third chakra, they're seeing money and business and power and will and all of that. So for me, it comes down to going, what stage of development am I at? And that'll determine what I'm actually seeing and receiving of the world. Like you said, that phone analogy is lovely. Like, what am I receiving? Well, I believe we really only receive what our altitude allows us to receive. You know, the same old classic well-worn story when you're looking for a new car and then you start to see them everywhere. I suddenly allowed something into my consciousness. So your consciousness is at a certain altitude, and all I see is fear and doubt everywhere. The world becomes a scary place, and I watch the 6 o'clock news and I get more of that. Or I see business and money and power and greed and focus and that. Or maybe in the heart, I'm starting to see connections everywhere now, and I'm starting to see kindness in the world. I'm starting to feel that emerge from me. I'm starting to feel like I'm in a flow state and I'm unworried. My altitude shift. And so that for me that's the intentionality of what you're dropping into the inner centers, if you like, is that recognition of this is kind of the world I'm in, this is the altitude I'm in, and yet I want to keep pushing the edge of that to challenge my altitude to go up. Because when I shift up from, say, second to third, I'm going to see a different world. When I shift from third to fourth, I'm going to see a different world. When I continue the journey of my own evolution, I'm going to get to a point in the throat where I can hold all these different ideas in myself. I'm no longer fighting with all these other points of view. I have a place where I can allow and accept. And Ken Wilber called that second tier. And he believes that 5% of the world are currently at that level. We're receiving that kind of telephone call. We're seeing that kind of world. And he said it's with utmost urgency that we pull enough people up to this second level of consciousness. It's a great leap. And then our altitude starts to, receive a very different reality that at the moment most people just got no idea. And even me talking about this will sound so esoteric and weird to most people that haven't journeyed through this. And yet there's just great science and my own experience of that has been, dropping in, realizing where I'm at, clearing the blocks, strengthening the vessel, and then becoming intentional. Pushing the edge, moving forward, and sort of stepping into those higher centers, but then getting pulled back down. So implanting the intention, the symbols, the hypnosis, whatever it is, starts to, show your unconscious mind, that's the new car I'm looking for, and it'll start seeing that, So when I put the ideas into my unconscious, it can start to reach up into that other realm. But the lower realms will keep pushing me back, pulling me down until I continue to strengthen, recognize and do the work, and then suddenly I'm there and I can't be pulled back down.
Because how would you explain why someone would want to do this kind of work? Because obviously it's like a lifetime of work and it's a lot of commitment. If say you had a student that had practiced, yoga for a while and they've started getting into meditation and things like that, and you think that they were ready to take it to the next level, how would you, I suppose, sell it? You know what I mean? Because that's what I think. When people ask what I'm doing with the runes, and you probably get similar things with Chakra Vinyasa, what actually is it, or what are the benefits from it? Like, why would someone want to commit so much time to doing something like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And again, a lot of people wouldn't, they just won't. I guess a couple of benefits that come from it is, like I said, evolution and growth and change is going to happen one way or another. Like, it's moving, the world's changing, and it's happening in us. I've always hated the idea of being, addicted to anything, or compelled or stuck in a place where I don't have agency and some level of control over my destiny and my future. So most people, I think, they're just getting by, just making enough money or barely enough. They're just struggling through life. And I just want to, for me, my number one selling point is just myself and the way I sort of hopefully emanate that quality and speak of that and let people, one, just notice, oh, here's someone who's doing it, and maybe there's something there I'd like to aspire towards. Wow, they seem like they've got a bit of a glow to them. They seem like they're bright. They seem 20 years younger than they are. They got great energy. So maybe that is a good calling card. Just be the change, to be the bumper sticker, be the change you want to see in the world, and just to live it. I think your greatest teaching is to just live the path and let others. I'll tell you a funny story. When I came back from London and my whole life had changed, and I had all these old school mates I used to party and drink with and that back in Australia. And I came back as this yogi, hippie wearing clothes, vegetarian, non-drinking. And I tell you, I didn't get invited to a lot of barbecues anymore. And those old school mates didn't understand, didn't get me. And then it was probably about 6 years later, I'd be kept to my path and my thing, and we had a poker night, and I thought I'd turn up, play some poker. And one of my mates turned to me and said, when we first saw you on this weird path, we thought, oh my God, what's happened to you? But 6 years on, I really admire what you've done and who you are, and kind of aspire to that. So, those kind of moments touch you a little bit, because you realize I'm just doing my thing, I'm living my path, I'm honoring my truth, I'm following what's right for me. And when people start to notice, it's like, oh, that's a validation. And then, as long as I've got a process and a teaching and a space, when the student is ready, they'll come. But I guess in a sense, the real reward is, for me, another student said to me years ago, oh, I feel like I've kind of woken up but I kind of feel flat. Is this it? And I said, you got to realize it just keeps getting better. As you open more, as you include more of reality within you, if that makes sense, as you hold in the vessel of yourself more of the energy of existence, the bliss and euphoria and energy and joy and health is just off the charts. So for me, there's this sort of ever-present freedom I discovered in 2005, but now this kind of bubbling joy and enthusiasm and bliss and euphoria almost that I can't get enough of, that's just getting richer and richer. So for me, people take drugs to get that. And, great, I think drugs have got a great part to play in people waking up too, whether it be MDMA or psychedelics. But man, you can manufacture it in yourself. If you're taking drugs, it's just often triggering your own dopamine and endorphins and serotonin channels, DMT pathways. It's like, man, I can sit down and meditate for half an hour and do the same thing. So, that's how I sell it. Why not?
Yeah.
If you can. Yeah,
I suppose like someone like me getting into it as well, or someone who more so interested in what kind of like abilities you would get, especially because this does have like a whole mythic framework around it, and you don't really know what it is. It's just mysterious practice. I suppose like what particular abilities. So you're saying you have like kind of a more aware perception of the world, more about like what you want out of life rather than just getting kind of swept along and unconscious around it. And do you find you have things click into place when you do decide you want something? Things just tend to click into place easier.
Sometimes.
Yeah, because I find sometimes things are just going ridiculously well, but then sometimes it's I feel like on this kind of path as well, there's a tendency that stuff you don't need gets swept out a lot. You know how you said when went to London, everything got swept from under you. That's happened quite a few times to me, and when it has happened, it's just horrible catastrophe and like the dark night of the soul kind of thing. Yeah, but I've always come out better from it. But do you think there's a correlation between that you do have this balance of starting to get things a bit easier, especially what you want, but then what you don't need necessarily gets swept out a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy, and we have a system in our teaching called effortlessness in action, and it's a sort of an operating system for your life that I think as you do the work, as you recognize these qualities within yourself, as you kind of dunk into that organizing field, you're spot on. Life becomes this more effortless flow. And you can, there's all these other teachers and coaches out there. There's so many steps and stages and things you got to freaking implement in your life. And I've looked at all them, and there's great things in them. And I mean, man, it's a lot of hard work. Or you can just commit to, I hate the word trust, but maybe we'll say trust. Trust that there's an energy in life, an organizing field that actually has your back. Not in a wanky new age way that the universe supports me, but if you'll allow that energy to move through you, it will move in a certain way. It'll either pull you down or pull you up, but it will move. But if you commit to resting in this openness and turning this energy in the right direction and avoiding the moments where it wants to pull back down, I do believe you do get this effortless flow in your life, and that a lot of the peripheral crap does just get cast out. And it's just such a beautiful way to live. I call it almost living a Teflon life, because it's a non-stick, because nothing kind of sticks so much. And then when, like you get the little bit of sticky stuff on the fry pan, you got to clean it off every now and again. So sometimes you got to do a bit of work.
It's pretty uncomfortable a lot of times. I don't know about you, but when those things happen, it usually jolts me out of it. It's like if I get too comfortable, I'm getting what I want. But then if I kind of take that for granted and then just end up getting what I want and then just getting comfortable and not coming back to my meditation practice, or it's kind of like the universe or my higher self, or whatever you call it, is kind of punishing me, being like, hey, mate, don't get too comfortable, you got work to do, get up. And that's what I feel like. It's just kind of, if I don't appreciate things too much, it kind of gets swept from under me. So I'm constantly trying to be uncomfortable, and that discomfort is where we grow a lot of the time as well.
I think that energy is always moving. Well, don't think it is. I mean, that's life. Is energy is just always moving, and it'll flow wherever it's directed, in a sense. And if we become stagnant, stagnancy equals death, decay, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So the minute we become stagnant, that pool or that chakra or whatever we're talking about, that energy center gets comfortable, and we want to hold that place, because right now, I feel kind of a certainty there. There's a security there. There's an easy comfort. Life's pretty good here. It's okay. Energy is going to keep flowing. It's going to keep flowing into that frequency, that altitude we talked about, and it has to find a way to move. And if you are not showing it a way to move up, it's only got one way to move, and it has to start pulling down, and it will inevitably. You've experienced, I've experienced, everyone's experienced it. It will start to pull down. So there is no way out, I don't think. There's no way out of space. There's no way out of existence. There's no way you can kind of claw yourself out of reality. We're stuck in it. So the question becomes, how do I want to live with it? Do I want to keep allowing that to move in the right direction, forward and up? And like you said, I think there's that sense of a recognition that comes when, like you said, I'm getting good things or whatever. The energy for me, and Ken Wilber was massive on this, he said, you want to imagine the evolution of the spirit as these increasing circles of care and compassion. And that's all I think about. You start, it's all about me. Like you said, how do you get someone in? It's all about me. Most people want benefit for themselves. I want to feel good, I want to feel healthy, happy. But that only drives you to a certain point, doesn't it? Like, once you're healthy and happy, that's pretty dull. And then you want to sort of look after your tribe and your family and your friends, and let that energy extend out to them. And teenagers do this well. It's all about your crew and your tribe and all of that. But then as adults, and as we keep evolving, there's that sense that I want to continually expand my consciousness, my energy, my field, to become sort of a citizen of the entire field of existence, to be about supporting, serving, and realizing that everyone is part of the same existence, same reality. So a teacher, DiMartini, I think it was, once said that as you continually move up in that frequency, the universe gives you more energy to hold in yourself. And as you continually expand your circle of care and kindness and love and wisdom, the universe pumps more energy into you so you can hold a bigger vortex and a bigger field and a bigger scope of serving. And ultimately, that's what a Buddha is. A Buddha is someone who's enlightened into that Buddha field, they call it, this Dharmakaya field that includes everything and everyone. And they just become like this emanation of love and compassion and wisdom into the field.
That brings me to another thing I'd like to ask, because I find with this, and I've experienced all touches of it, that when you're really delving into it, especially deep meditation and working with these systems, how do you kind of bring yourself back to earth in the way of, when we're talking about enlightenment, some people kind of just think they'll experience something and think that their truth is the universal truth. Like, how do you, especially when you're getting into that and you're even sharing it with other people and they're having the results, how do you kind of bring yourself back to earth and try to, I suppose, bring resistance back into how you perceive things? Because, if we don't have resistance, we could just believe anything as long as everyone agrees with us. We just live in our fantasy world. So, like, how do you suggest people getting into this who are really starting to get results from it, but how do you yourself bring yourself back to earth and kind of bring back that sense of humor that you're always going to be forever learning, and it's not just that end destination where you're enlightened and then la-di-da.
Yeah.
How do you kind of bring yourself back?
Well, it really comes back to how we started this discussion, and that's why that calm living process for me, before doing the subtle work, you need to recognize the nature of mind and be grounded in that. Because for me, again, language, you said, is you're sort of getting off earth into that. I never have a sense that I'm going anywhere. I never have a sense that I'm getting off earth because there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to get to. There's no enlightenment waiting for me. There's no state I'm trying to get to that's better or worse than this. Everything is equal and even in the totality. It just is. It's expressing itself. So for me, that grounding in openness, that grounding in inclusivity, there's not a sense of me that I'm going anywhere in this journey. There's a sense that I'm opening and including more of that within me. Does that make sense? That's a really key distinction. It's like, I'm not on a journey anywhere. I'm not getting somewhere. I'm not waiting to arrive somewhere. I'm already there. That's the starting point. Recognize that, and then allow what you're doing to be the inclusive. I'm holding more of that. I'm holding more joy and love and compassion and bliss within that openness.
Yeah.
So for me personally, there's not a sense of getting or going. There's a sense of just opening.
Yeah.
So it's a continual opening.
I guess what I mean is when you said even dipping into that idea of the collective conscious, or when you're starting to get insights, I suppose, that you can't really rationally explain. How do you? Because I think with any of this kind of stuff, because it's intangible, it's important to at least try to rationalize it. And if you have a theory about how something works for you, or how people have religious experiences, it's so subjective. How do you bring that back into the world to be able to not only share it with other people and have them get similar results, but how do you not live in that,
other world?
The other world, exactly. Yeah, bring it back. I think that's what I mean.
It's a great question, and something I've been exploring in recent years that's kind of taken off around the planet too is the plant medicine world, with different psychedelics, whether it be ayahuasca or DMT or psilocybin, things like that. And a lot of people out there these days are running off to Peru to do their ayahuasca journeys, or it's happening all over the world, or using mushrooms or anything. And the thing that happens is people have these profound state shift experiences. You are blasted off into all sorts of just wild worlds where you can be communing with aliens. You can be just dwelling in these temples of light. You can be merging with God. You can have these profound, you can be plunged into just darkness and mud and pain and suffering, and you go through all of that. And then people have that for 5 or 6 hours, and suddenly they're back just here, like us, sitting here talking, and it's like, whoa, what the hell just happened? And for a lot of people, that integration phase, like you said, is really challenging. And so people say, a month after a psychedelic experience, I'm not sure what to make of that. And yet, here's this interesting thing. People that have these profound altered states, whether it's through psychedelics or through meditation or whatever, this modern research that came out recently was talking about people with addictions. And it said people that have a psychedelic experience with an addiction, and on that psychedelic experience have a spiritual experience. They're not just seeing bright lights, they're actually getting a sense of connecting with spirit, God, truth, whatever you want to call it. When they have that experience, those people to a T quit their addiction cold turkey, never again. People that don't have the profound spiritual experience, they don't. So it's an interesting thing that happens, that we can have these really wild state shifts and we come back and we think, oh, I'm not sure what the hell to make of that. Yet something's kind of changed. For these people that are really connected to that, whatever spiritual even means, but this sort of real other-worldly, inner-worldly, whatever language you want to use, don't have language for it, when they've connected with that, it's like their brain's rewired, and there's research showing out the brain rewires when we have these altered state experiences. Things shift, our neurochemistry changes. So things do happen, and it's important that you do have these sort of altered state shifts, to sit and push yourself in meditation longer, to go on long retreats till you have a breakthrough, till you have an altered state, to maybe, if you're open, to explore plant medicines. I think plant medicine and meditation and even the energetic meditation is like the ultimate blend of self-transformation, and that people do. But one, the integration happens at an underlying level and people just change. But there's also, I think, a way to integrate post-session or post-meditation or post-retreat. That's what I've taken to doing in my clinic with people with the hypnotic work and inner change work, is to run what I call these post-psychedelic integration sessions. And I'll often run a minimum of 3 and maybe even up to 8 sessions over the next 3 months, where I'll get people to go, or after a retreat or whatever, and work through their experience and like you said, drop in the right processes to clear the little things that need to be swept away, that they can clear in their consciousness so they don't have to get it in life. So I think it is really important to find ways to support yourself, whether journaling, whether having a support group, a daily meditation practice, whatever it is, to, just keep it going. And lastly, just add to that, so that the idea is that you have these altered state shifts through your practice, but you want to eventually let them become structural changes. As that famous saying said, altered states become permanent traits. And the altered state has to grow into a new structure. And Ken Wilber talks about we have states and structures. And most spirituality never talked about structure, it was always states. So you have this guru who has these altered states and these profound connections with consciousness, and they come back and they're still playing around and abusing their students, as we see all the way in the world, because they're stuck in like a second chakra frequency. They haven't changed their structure. So there's this constant game of shifting your consciousness and opening into that field, and yet doing the work of growing through the structures. And that's what Chakra Vinyasa gives to me. It's just a model. It's one of many, but it's a model for that.
One thing I wanted to get your opinion on is I suppose the idea of reincarnation and things like that, because I suppose most humans have thought about this concept of what happens after life, after death, and I think it's prompted by what you were talking about. And what was that book that you mentioned about the idea of the animals having the extended consciousness?
Yeah, one mind.
One mind.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm interested in that idea of the difference, or how it relates, or your opinion on the idea of consciousness being carried on through, our physical DNA, or is it carried on through this collective unconscious, or is it some other concept that you've thought about? Like, how do you kind of view consciousness after death, or do you even view it as that, or do you believe in reincarnation? Basically, I suppose your point of view on how consciousness is recycled, because I think of, if everything is just recycled in some form or way, if all matter is recycled, then if consciousness is part of matter, or if it's separate, I think it somehow gets recycled. I suppose just your point of view on all that.
Yeah, it was something I probably used to think a lot more about, and as I said, this experience I had in 2005, where I think the lights went on somehow and my mind shifted. I haven't thought about this a lot. in a way, sort of to discuss it like this for a long time, because for me, when my mind shifted and kind of opened to, I don't know what even to describe it as, and as I've been explaining in this kind of ever-present openness, that even things like rebirth and reincarnation and having this body and living and dying, those all become just concepts. They become points of view within this open ground of being, of awareness that's holding everything, that doesn't ultimately change. So it might be the case that all these things happen, and we can play around and sort of surmise maybe here on what might be going on. But for me, a lot of those concepts kind of drifted and just got integrated into this openness of wakefulness and presence, that for me, the whole path became one of giving my attention to what is unborn and undying, rather than what is continually being born and dying. Do you know what I mean? So it's, and then just enjoying the game of existence, where everything moment to moment is being born and dying, really, isn't it? So, I mean, 100,000 cells have died in the last second, and everything's changing. So the idea of rebirth, it's happening at so many levels on the continuum. Every breath is a rebirth, isn't it? Every moment a cell's changing. And we can just extrapolate that out. I think what I love about these esoteric teachings is this idea of what's called spanda. And it's this idea that everything is a constant stage of expansion or contraction. Everything's always either expanding or contracting. It's opening, it's closing. And so everything's rhythmic and cyclical. And like you said, everything's probably being recycled in some way. Everything's just in a certain phase of either opening or closing, but it's never really being born, it's never really dying. And sort of even modern physics around the universe have this sense of the whole universe is just in a stage of expansion, quite possibly condensation, contraction, and maybe we're part of multiple or infinite universes that are all just doing the same. Our body breathes, the earth breathes, the sun breathes, the universe, the galaxies expand and contract. Everything's just in this perpetual phase of it's somewhere in a cycle. So, life for me is probably very much the same if we think about it like that, that life is probably almost, if you think about it like a breath, it's kind of like the inhale phase. It's when I inhale, I'm drawing in, I'm sitting up tall, I'm awake, I'm bright. Life is this wakeful state. And death is probably almost like the exhale phase, if you think of it like a breath, where I breathe out my last breath and I am no more in the form I was. And whatever the spirit of that moment is, that sort of next phase moves in until maybe ultimately there's breath breathed into the next moment of existence, whether in an embodied state, whether in a disembodied state. I don't know, but I just feel like this cyclical nature of existence, like a breath, everything is contained in this spanda or this pulse of life. And if everything in the universe is breathing in that way, the planets, the stars, everything's got this pulse, this movement, this contraction, this everything, why wouldn't I be like that? Like, why wouldn't I go on? Why aren't I part of totality? And why would I just be snuffed out? But I don't know. Who knows? We're all going to find out.
That's why I'm just interested to hear people's opinion, especially someone who's delved so deeply into meditation. I just think we'll probably never know, but it's interesting to talk about it and how we perceive it. And I've just looked into other people's theories, and some say that, we'll just kind of fall back into that pool, that collective unconscious, and maybe bring back certain aspects of ourselves. And people talk about, past lives and things, or some people believe that our consciousness is like our psychology, inherently part of our DNA, and only through, being reincarnated through actually physically being reborn through that direct family line. There's so many different theories, and I just have no idea. So I just interested to see other just talking to you about all this and the idea of consciousness in general. If there is that, that thing that perceives, then how does that live, on in some way, or how does our consciousness be retained in some way after the physical body dies? And if so, what is that? And I know you don't have the answers to it. I'm just interested to see what ticks over in your brain when we talk about these concepts. And
well, it's interesting, isn't it? There's so many ways that you can come at it. Like I said, with this recognition of awareness, this basic state that I don't relate to as it's not mine. It's I am a reality that's arising within that basic state of awareness, but that basic state of awareness isn't contained within me. It just is. It's God, it's spirit, it's essence, whatever you want to call it. It just is just this space that includes and contains everything. So I no longer really always am a personal identity. I don't relate to myself as being someone or something that's going anywhere, but I just imagine that like every moment that I wake up and recognize that I am that, and I think that things just arise out of that, like that moment of I'm awake again, that arises. So I just feel like the next life would just arise in the same way. Suddenly there's just wakefulness again within this totality. And that sounds really esoteric and hard to understand, so let's look at it from another way. Is what we understand now with our DNA. In some ways, we used to think our DNA and our gene sequence was set and it was just going to do its thing. And then about, 10, 15 years ago, the study of epigenetics, they suddenly realized that, hang about, our perceptions epigenetically trigger the proteins around our DNA, and they change the way our genetic switching happens. So now we realize that the way we do think, the way we do have our consciousness, the way we do feel, the way we do navigate our mind is altering the way our genetic sequences is happening. They don't yet say that it's changing the genetic structure, but it's changing the way genes select for either health or disease or certain traits or characteristics. So if we just extend that out and say to ourselves, now we know that we have an operating system for matter and energy, which is our DNA, and we realize that that DNA is constantly enmeshed with consciousness, and consciousness and DNA are constantly reforming and changing each other, it's not that much of a stretch if we extend our idea into the collective field, that we are a sort of diffuse collective consciousness, to say that in another child that just inherits the genetics of its parents and its grandparents, it will be the genetic imprint of its parents, as we are. And yet perhaps there could be a consciousness that's overlaid through that, that's part of this field, that then once again starts to interact and is kind of top down, bottom up, if that makes sense. So that's how I kind of feel that the ideas of reincarnation or soul is probably this almost this level of this collective field of whatever interacts with the genetics of that next life. And maybe there's inherent memory in that field, which we believe there is. And maybe those memories wake up. Maybe there is individuality in it. Like, who knows? But man, this is such an exciting thing to explore. I can't think of a more exciting thing to spend a human life.
Yeah.
You said, how do you get someone excited? Far out. If you can't be excited about exploring the possibility of this, and screw the science that says it can't be, it's like, well, hang on, I'm at least going to spend my life checking it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, like my whole philosophy is just seek the mysteries, and this idea of like seeking them, even hoping actually that I never find the answer, because it's just fun trying to unravel it. It'll almost be depressing if I find the answer, then I've got nowhere to go. So it's always just trying to seek on. And I have a very similar point of view. And that's why I'm interested as well, because you've worked in hypnosis now, that idea of past lives, and if you've had experience and things like that. Like whether you think it is just if someone has past life experiences, is it just one line, or are they maybe tapping into just everyone? So it's maybe not necessarily that one consciousness experiencing themselves again and again. It's this current consciousness experiencing from that pool, just randomly pulling out, and who knows what that even means. It's just like maybe a whole nother conversation.
I'll have had people go in hypnosis into what they perceive as past lives. I'll always give the instruction in a regression hypnosis that time is infinite in all directions, and to go as far back as you need to understand and resolve this issue forever. And sometimes people are just catapulted back 500 years and they get a sense that they are somebody in that space and time. But in truth, they can't ever be that body, because that body died and the genetics of that body died, but maybe some imprint of that life, the lessons and learnings, the wisdom, the love, whatever that moves into the collective field is always there, like a whirlpool in a river. Like the whirlpool is always the river, and yet it temporarily appears like a whirlpool and it gets caught up. Okay. So maybe the energy of a human life, the lessons and learnings become always part of the stream, but they become like this whirlpool. And maybe those whirlpools are what we tap back into if we do a process like that, and that whirlpool becomes like a zip file on a computer that opens up to that whole life again and all the memories and learnings. But it's such a it's not like the person that was there. It's that there's an essence of a process that is still circulating in that river. And the amazing thing that happens when that person now goes back into that experience, and imagine that the little whirlpool, they develop an insight now, today, about that, and they realize this issue they've had in their life, this 400 years ago explains that. You could imagine that in the present, you are healing the past 400 years ago, to not blow our heads off too much, and that as they resolve that here, now, today, you could imagine that whirlpool suddenly relaxes back into the river of all existence. So as I say, time is infinite in all directions. Right now, we are influencing the past potentially as much as the future, if you consider it not as independent moments in time or independent entities, but maybe like whirlpools in a river. It's a nice way to think about it.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like that concept. And yeah, we might have to end it here for now. But I'd love to get you back, and I think I'd love to chat to you more about the plant medicine idea and even these ideas, and delve in more into the NLP and hypnosis. And I'd love to have you back.
Love to. It's been a pleasure.
Cool. So I think we'll just finish off with just any links that you'd like to share of how people can find out more about what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So our main business is called Being Yoga. And you can just jump online, beingyoga.com.au, and check that out. We have teacher training courses, retreats. The Chakra Vinyasa retreat you've been talking about, I regularly run mindfulness training. There's online courses and retreats. My clinic is called mindfulmodernpsychology.com. You can check that out and contact me, and I do sessions in person and online. And I'm specializing also in this post-psychedelic integration work. So if anyone out there has done this anywhere in the world, really, and has done this psychedelic work and would love to speak to someone who's really delved into this field and has some tools to maybe help them integrate, that's a real passion of mine, to sort of guide people through that. Yeah.
Perfect. And any books you recommend, or any authors? Because you mentioned quite a few. Anything else that you recommend as far as authors to look into?
Oh, there's a couple of books by Dawson Church I think are fantastic if you want to look at the science behind energy and fields and things these days. Irvin Laszlo's written great things. Ken Wilber's work, fantastic. Oh God, there's so many, but I can give you a list of some if you like. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Maybe have it ready for the next time or something.
Cool. No worries.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again. I really appreciate chatting, and we'll definitely have you on again very soon, and love to chat more about it.
Thanks, my pleasure.
Thank you.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Rune Yoga Embodying Magic podcast. My name is Daniel Cumming, and big thanks to Michael Daly for joining us on the show today. Beingyoga.com.au is the portal that can take you to all the information about Being Yoga, what Michael does, his retreats, and even doing your yoga teacher training. www.runeyoga.org, so RUNE yoga.org is the portal to see all your Rune Yoga Embodying Magic details, about the podcast, about retreats that I'm doing, about all the good stuff that we've got going on at the moment here. And big thanks to everyone that's tuned in today. See you next time. Ryan to Rune.